Good evening. Planning board is now in session. Sorry for the little delay. There's no parking out there today. I guess the scouts are having something next door. And, oh, one more thing. Glasses in here. I couldn't find my glasses, so there's always a backup here. First item on the agenda, 154, 156 Northborough Road. Major site plan approval. This has been continued from June 4th, July 23rd, and July 30th. I'll ask the town planner to update us on where we are with this project right now. Karina.
All right. The last planning board meeting, which was the third meeting held for this project, was on July 30th. At that time, the applicant had submitted a revised set of plans to be reviewed, but following that meeting, it was put on hold because there was an anticipation of some more significant changes to the plans. So we attempted to hold off on the review by Fuss and O'Neill. They had already started that review at the time. Then following that, on August 29th, their engineer, Stansky and McNary, submitted revised plans and documents dated August 13th, 2018, with an updated stormwater report, various documents including list of waivers, a outline of requirements that potential tenants would have to fulfill, or the leasing manager, in order to make sure that the building department and the Board of Health knew what kind of operation would be leasing the spaces. We received Fuss and O'Neill review comments last Friday, which were distributed back to the applicant. They're in your packages to take a look at. That is regarding the site plans and the lid application. This afternoon, we also received review comments, a follow-up to the traffic information that had previously been submitted, responded to, and then a follow-up review was done by Fuss and O'Neill. We've also received a few additional comments from various town departments.
Yes.
Okay. One being from the Treasurer's Office on September 7th. We received notification that the property's in a tax lien position, and I notified the applicant immediately so that he could address it with the property owner. Part of that comment, when we received that information, that was approvals are supposed to not be acted on until that is straightened out. And I know that conservation is also has kind of held you up on that as well. Open Space Preservation Commission has provided a letter regarding the work that you and the commission have done together to address many of the questions on the species of vegetation for the landscaping, maintenance of those. There may be a few more questions on that, but we do have a letter, and I think you received that letter as well as the applicant. We received a couple of comments from the fire department regarding their concern with the use of welding in the leased spaces and how to go about controlling that and what happens if you do allow somebody to do welding there for Board of Health safety concerns. There had been a prior request discussing a potential memorial or preserving the memorial that is there somewhere in the vicinity of the project. Then we also received information from the Board of Health that Board of Health submitted a letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals indicating that the septic system plan had been approved. And in that letter, they also indicated considerations for the zoning board, which I've also passed on to the planning board members regarding that there be no dwelling or sleeping in the units, no washing machines or showers, and related to the fact that the septic system is designed to only take a certain amount of gallons per day, and those would increase, those types of uses would increase that, and then may not have, let your Board of Health plan be valid. And then there was a concern about outside storage. You know, if you're gonna store different types of things out there, the aesthetics of it, and will it become messy and create a, you know, not a good look to the site or unsafe conditions. As far as conservation, you've submitted for revisions to a stormwater permit? Or you've submitted plans similar to the ones, or exactly the same as what we have here tonight? And you were waiting to actually continue that hearing, or actually submit it until after planning board has some decisions or answers for you? Okay. So they're still pending conservation permits. All right, and so what we have tonight is the current submission, which is the 4th submission that the planning board has received for the major site plan approval and for the lower impact development. And that pretty much brings us up to speed.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome back. You're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Mark Bobrowski, my office is in Concord. We thought we'd do the following order this evening. To my left is Robert Michaud, our traffic engineer. He's just going to hit a couple of highlights with regard to traffic. Mr. Michaud will...
Let's start with, for the record.
Okay. For the record, thank you. Mark Bobrowski, my office is in Concord. I represent the applicant. We're going to do a number of different presentations, all of which I think will move us forward this evening. The first is Mr. Michaud, to my left, signing off on traffic. If you didn't see it, a letter came in just hot off the press a second ago from Fuss and O'Neill, and I think it pretty much puts closure on some traffic issues. We'll follow that up with our landscape architect, Peter Furland, who will talk about the progress made with your open space committee. Then our engineer, Bill Hall, will walk you through the lid changes that we've made to the plan and briefly discuss the review letter from Fuss and O'Neill, in which they had a couple of dozen comments. I'd like to end by talking about the protocol for new tenants that I submitted to the board a month ago and see if we can't reach some consensus on that. It would leave us with the response to Fuss and O'Neill's last Friday's comments on our revised plans to put in the low-impact development features. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Bob.
Thank you. For the record, Robert Michaud, principal with MDM Transportation Consultants based in Marlborough, Massachusetts. My business partner last presented to this board some responses to peer review in a letter that was prepared by our office dated to July 26th of this year. There were really only 2 principal requests as part of that peer review. One was a confirmation that appropriate sight lines be provided at the driveways in such a manner as plantings or other features not obstruct that visibility to the driveways. Some discussion centered around whether or not certain traffic controls would be placed at one or both driveways, including those opposite the site at property that is not controlled by the applicant. And the second having to do with quantifying traffic activity for the driveway, the easterly driveway, 153 Northborough Road. So we've addressed both of those points that were the subject of Fuss and O'Neill's final review letter dated to today, in which they indicate that we have adequately addressed both issues, and I'll go into a little bit of detail on the driveway. We'll start with the westerly driveway. Since the last presentation before this board, the applicant has in fact committed to converting the driveways to one-way operation. The westerly driveway, which is directly opposite 155, 495 Technology Center, would be the inbound or entering only driveway. The exit-only driveway would be the easterly driveway, which, as the board is aware, is about 215 feet to the west of number 153. That series of changes then allows certain modifications to the site, because we're talking about a one-way circulation pattern in which the paved area of the driveways, as well as the circulation aisles within the property, can be reduced in a way to accommodate that traffic flow. So my firm is of the opinion that those changes represent a material benefit, and that it eliminates the conflicts that could ordinarily occur at the westerly driveway, and concentrates movements to a location that is not opposite another driveway or intersection. The project itself is classified as a business park. That's the technical term under the trip generation methodology that we've applied. This is very similar to a land use that is in fact immediately adjacent to our corporate office in Marlborough, and we're very familiar with that operation. These are sometimes called flex office spaces, and we believe that the trip impact assessment that has been published and peer-reviewed properly documents the likely level of impact that this project will have, which is very modest. As it relates to the traffic volume information that was requested, that's been provided. They've agreed with the assessment, concluding that the originally submitted analysis of June 22nd, 2018, that's the originally submitted traffic report, is in fact valid. So we don't have anything further to add to that, but we're certainly willing to answer any questions that this board might have, make sure that we're being comprehensive.
Yeah, let me just ask the board, or you also, counsel, if you'd prefer the board address each presentation before we move on to the next one, or if we wait till the end. Members?
Usually we wait till the end, but.
Okay.
Thank you. We can accommodate that. We'll shuffle people back up to the microphone. Thank you. Mr. Ferland will now talk about the progress made in the native species and the planting plan for the property.
Hi, I'm Peter Ferland, landscape architect from
If you
Southborough.
could just hold on for 1 second. You getting that, Trevor? Okay.
Southborough Design Group. I'm just going to go through what we did for revisions for the plan. First of all, I just want to thank Freddie. We worked closely with her on the open space preservation, and I worked closely with her on trying to get her happy with the plan and also meet you guys' your requirements. Major changes we made. The engineer had provided me with some parking islands in the back, which now will provide us with trees in the back side of the property. We did provide a little bit of screening along the back side that was left before. Other major changes, we moved along the front of the property. We got rid of all the lawn area. The engineer has now provided with 5 rain gardens, which are all individually planted with native plants. The front planting is, again, all natives to Massachusetts, and it's a mixture. It's an organized mixture of natives, so that it does look. It's not going to look wild, but it's going to look native, but in an organized way, if you can understand that. It's a tougher challenge when you are getting rid of all lawn areas. Just quickly to go through, we have a very low grass, considering what you wanted with the cars coming through and site view. We have very low grass that runs along the front of the property. In the center of the buildings, we have a sage grass, and on the sides, we have wildflowers. And then native plants throughout the front there. We did provide screening because we have proposed dumpsters on the side. So we're providing some screening, which we're using, actually, I forgot which plant we were using there. Either juniper or a spruce were used for screening along the property there, for the parking lot, so you can't see it from the street. I believe all the plants now are native to Massachusetts. Before, the plants were just native to the East Coast. So they're now all native to Massachusetts on it. And we're also providing a maintenance plan for the project now. It's going to, we are going to put an irrigation system in it. And one of the current concerns was the deer and the rabbits to eat it. So in the irrigation system, we're going to put an injection system on this thing, on the system, which will, there is a, which are basically going to inject castor oil and clover oil, which will coat the plants and just doesn't want, so the animals don't want to eat it, but yet it's not harmful to them. So that would provide for watering and care for the plants for the 2 years that we are offering this maintenance for it. Other things we're doing, just weed control. There's natural and organic weed control, which is using citrus oils to control the weeds, which you can use in one of those compressors. I guess that's it.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, I know that you may have a copy of this. It's a letter dated today, I think, from, yes, it is from the Open Space Preservation Commission, and I'm pleased to read that your reporter from that committee thinks that Mr. Furland's done a magnificent job of addressing the request that natives be used instead of lawn. So there's more praise in there. I'll edit down to that, and I'm sure your communications will amplify that. Thank you, Peter. This next presentation will be by Bill Hall, and he'll walk you through the changes that were made to comply with the LID bylaw.
Good evening, Bill Hall from Stamsey and McNary for the record. So as Mark said, there were many changes that were made to further comply with the LID bylaw for this iteration of plans. To start, we did receive comments from Fuss and O'Neill. There are 24 comments that we have to address. There's some clarification of calculations in there. There's some minor changes that will be taking place, but there's nothing substantial. We believe that we can address all of the comments and take care of that in a timely fashion. So what we've done is we've incorporated all of the site design techniques listed in your LID bylaw. To start, we got rid of the sidewalks that were along the front. So those are gone altogether. It's going to be all windows along the front, and I can show you the architectural plan in a minute once I get through this. We have 5 rain gardens along the front of the building. We went to 18-foot wide entrances on either side, and Karina pointed out to me today that the fire department has some comments on that. We may need to bump that to 20 feet. Given that it's porous pavement, that's not a substantial change to stormwater calculations because it just goes right in. And we have a large amount of porous pavement on the site. It's actually approximately 50% porous pavement on the site now. And as Peter mentioned, we took out parking spaces to provide landscape islands throughout the parking lot. So I'll quickly go through this memo that Mr. Bobrowski prepared, and that is in your package. So just going through the LID bylaw, A is the preservation of the site's natural features, and we're minimizing our impact on natural features to the extent possible. This site was previously cleared, and we're largely within that previously cleared area, so it's mostly small vegetation that's growing in there. There's no old growth. We're minimizing impact to the wetland area and enhancing the right-of-way with all the plantings that Peter had mentioned. and that goes to be minimization of grading and clearing. We're proposing one-to-one riprap slopes to minimize the grading to the maximum extent possible. And we are also clustering the buildings into, or the building. It's just one single building with a connector in the middle to minimize that as well. For D, we are using stormwater techniques that provide superior infiltration and treatment. We're using rain gardens, we're using porous pavement. We have these landscape islands. We're actually using a filter media that's the same media that goes into the bottom of the rain gardens to provide some treatment in there as well. We're using the grass channels to convey runoff as much as possible off the roadway. And just really creating many smaller watersheds. So you have runoff from the road, you don't have runoff that's coming from here and getting treated all the way down here. It's getting split up into these areas, and then you have the grading of the parking lot to treat that area, the pervious pavement, in separate areas throughout there as well. So it's not centralized on one portion of the site. And that goes along with F as well, emphasis on simple, non-structural, low-tech, low-cost methods. Again, using rain gardens, porous pavement, no more underground chambers, no more catch basins or hydrodynamic separators, anything like that. All sheet runoff either to porous pavement or rain gardens on the site. Reduction of impervious surfaces is G, going back to removing landscape islands and, adding landscape islands, removing parking spots, and reducing the entrance as much as possible. I would like to point out that we still have 22 feet between the aisle because that's the minimum requirement in your regulations. H is the reduction of heat island effects. So again, same, it goes to reducing impervious area, so same from last time. Use of native plant vegetation, I believe Peter covered that very well on his, on how we're using native plant vegetation throughout the entire site. And then J is a list of techniques integrated into every aspect of the site design. We're providing every one of these, including a rain cistern, which will collect runoff from this building here and allow it to be used for irrigation. The one thing on here that we cannot do is roof gardens. The Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook lays out the standards of and requirements for that. Roof gardens are not applicable because we're in a critical area. So by the stormwater management standards, we're not allowed to use those. So those have been omitted from the site design. So those are the major changes, and like I said, we do have some comments from Fuss and O'Neill, but we will be able to address those easily and in a timely fashion. So just to show you the architectural plans again, I know you've seen these. Last time there was discussion, are there going to be windows, doors, getting rid of the sidewalk in the front, it's going to be windows in the front. So this is the view that you'll see. From the previous meeting, there were comments on lighting that came up as well. So we have a revised lighting plan, which uses lights that's ground lighting that points at the building for the front to give you the lighting from the street, so there won't be glare from lights on the street. Otherwise, the lighting from the parking lot remains largely the same. I believe those are the major points on that, and I'll hand it off to Mark.
Thanks, Bill. I think if you look at the Fuss and O'Neill letter from last Friday, probably the biggest comment that they had in terms of time and work would be 63A. It requires us, or it's recommended that we do additional test pits in order to make sure that these lid features that have been added work properly. We've already contacted DigSafe, and the additional test pits will probably be done as early as this Friday. So we're optimistic that we can get Fuss and O'Neill the additional data that they need in order to close this out in short order. The rest of the comments that they've made were largely inspired by the new plan that you see in front of you, and we don't think that there are major issues to address there. So that concludes the technical presentation. My discussion with the board with regard to the protocol for new tenants is more of a legal matter, and I don't know if you want me to present that now, Mr. Chairman, or you want to do the technical questions first?
Yeah, let's go through the technical, what you've submitted, we have time to work on that.
Okay.
We should focus on the, you know, this technical stuff, the engineering.
We look forward to your questions then.
Sure. So that's it for the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. I'll open it up to the planning board. Mr. Mills?
So, I mean, first of all, impressed how much was changed and looked at in the short amount of time. I know it's been a little while, but we still got a lot done, so I want to acknowledge that, and thank you. From the traffic standpoint, I also appreciate the taking the recommendation of looking at the one-way. I think, you know, from a practical standpoint, that makes a lot of sense, and appreciate you adopting that feedback. A question on the sprinkler piece, and I'm just trying to understand, you said that castor oil and something else was going to be injected. I interpreted that you said for 2 years, or is that going to be ongoing for the life of the, I'm just...
Well, they asked us to give a 2-year commitment for it, and so that's what we said we would do it for 2 years. I mean, it's the irrigation system's going to be installed, the injection system's going to be there. I don't see why you wouldn't. It's not a big output on that, just for the castor oil and clover oil to inject into the system. The thing that will happen is, as the plants mature, the irrigation system requirements will go down. You know, the plants won't need the amount of water. So it would be a case where, you know, depending on like a summer like this, you would have to use it a little bit more, but, and then they'll have to use a little bit of judgment of how much of the castor oil, clover oil you need to put in the system. But it's definitely a 2-year commitment, just because that's what it's going to take to give a really reliable establishment to the plants.
Thank you. And the other question I had for the front of the building again, I know you said there's going to be no doors. It looked like there were 2 doors, though, in the middle, but those are just going to be windows, is that correct?
Yes, that would be correct. Right, correct, Joel? We'd be eliminating these doors, because those are at the front of the building.
So it's what?
So no, those doors will remain, those front doors. We've talked about before, windows.
You need a mic.
2 wings. So those 2 doors in the middle will remain if we need them for egress. If we don't need them for egress, we could get rid of them, but if we need them for egress, then obviously that's over my head.
So do we need them for egress?
Suggest that you do your homework on that with the fire department or the building inspector.
All right, well, I'll just
I
make it
think
easy.
you're probably right.
I'll just
that-
make it easy then. Those are gonna be doors.
Okay. And then, so I guess, you know, I haven't had time to go through all the Fuss and O'Neill pieces. We get those today, but I assume that that's going to be addressed.
There's a decent amount of review comments from Fuss and O'Neill regarding the infiltration components and rain gardens and where there are outfalls and what's tied to what, and some details regarding like the cistern. What is that going to look like? There are pipes in some areas that aren't shown to logically connect the way it's been displayed. So I know you say, they're minor
Okay.
things that can be addressed, but there are a variety of cleanup details for the lid
Right.
to show that it works, and then also present it into the stormwater calculation to make sure that how you are presenting it is shown, and then it also reflects in the stormwater report.
Okay. And the other piece, I think you mentioned that, the comment from, it was open space about the partnership that happened. Hopefully that can be used as a model going forward with other applicants. It was great to see that partnership and, with another town entity, so appreciate that, that
Thank
work
you.
that was
Were
done.
we your first? Under the new
First,
bylaw?
with those specific, requests, I believe, yes. That we've seen to that extent, yes.
Thank you.
So, but appreciate the partnership that was done. I'm good for now.
Thank you. Mr. Jenks?
I like it. I like what you've done with it. For traffic counts, you have classified it as an office park. What would your second choice have been?
Well, there are a variety of land use codes that we've looked at. The one that most closely matches the characteristic of this building is called Business Park, but I'll read the descriptive. It's as follows: a business park consists of a group of flex-type or incubator 1- or 2-story buildings served by a common roadway system. The tenant space is flexible and lends itself to a variety of uses. The rear side of the building is usually served by a garage door. This is almost exactly what we're talking about here. Tenants may be startup companies or small, mature companies that require a variety of space. The space may include offices, retail and wholesale stores, recreational areas, warehousing, manufacturing, light industrial, scientific or research functions. The average mix is 20 to 30% office/commercial and 70 to 80% industrial warehousing, and so on and so forth. And it actually goes in to describe other similar land use categories, which we've looked at. The one that best fits this and that we're most familiar with, because we happen to have a corporate office that's directly next door to one, is exactly what this is, a business park. And the business park, based on this number of units and square footage, will be a modest generating use. We're talking about a use that's going to represent 0.5 to 2% change in area traffic volumes, far below the intensity levels of what you see across the street, for instance. So we're very comfortable with this category.
The entrance driveway,
Yes.
is it safe to assume that large trucks going east can turn into that driveway without going out into the middle of the road to make the turn? That looked a little narrow, but I didn't see dimensions on it, but
It's a great question. In the original iteration, we actually did an auto turn analysis for the largest responding vehicle, which would be a ladder truck.
right.
And with a driveway dimension of, I believe it was at least 22 feet at the time, 22 feet with a 25-foot curb radii, two-way, right, enter and exit driveway, we had sufficient maneuvering area for that largest vehicle. Even with the reduction in the paved area here, because it's a one-way operation, and because this is a 35-mile-an-hour zone as well, we're comfortable that the width with the 25-foot curb radius will allow for proper maneuvering into whether it's a right turn or a left turn, but we would be glad to demonstrate that with an exhibit for the board's benefit, and certainly to satisfy the fire department.
Yeah, I think they're the ones you have to satisfy. And
I agree.
okay.
Yeah, so we will provide that.
Speaking of the fire department, part of the discussion on windows in the front was, do you need a second egress from each of the units? Now, you just said that in the middle, you'd leave those as doors. And I'm not quite sure what's behind those doors. That's office space. But the individual units, you've got in the back, overhead doors. Do they also have, they do? And are those in the overhead door? Or
No.
they're separate?
Yeah.
Good. There was some talk about knockout windows if another egress was required. And my question is simply, have you checked that?
Well, but the way this, point it out. So you can see right here, here's the garage door, here's the man door. That's just like a single unit, so every unit would have both of those.
Okay.
But on this side, and it kind of speaks to even, you know, the concern about, well, you know, is the, you know, people putting stuff outside, is it going to be unsightly? This is at a higher elevation. The front's at a higher elevation than the back. So unless there was a mezzanine put in here, these windows, you wouldn't really be able to access them. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's almost like a walkout basement from the
Here-
front side. So your space on this side is below these windows unless there's a mezzanine.
Guarantee you, if there was a fire in there blocking the doors in back, I'd access them.
Okay.
Yeah. What else are you gonna do?
Yeah,
But
I was just
I
pointing.
think the key is to make sure that the fire chief and the building commissioner are on board with that. If for no other reason, you don't want to get this in the middle of construction and have someone complain about code violation, or, I don't know what the code is there, but you should check it. That's all I had. I'll say again, I like what you've done with it.
Thank you. Mr. Stein?
Well, I'd just like to echo my fellow board members and commend the applicant for the work that they've done in the interim based on the feedback and in collaboration with the Open Space Commission. Really appreciate your effort and your work with this project. I think the only aspect of it that I'm a little bit unclear on is the doors in the front of the building. Since you've eliminated a walkway, that would mean that people would be traipsing through landscaping in order to approach the doors. So I would strongly recommend looking at an alternative for that aspect of the plan. I'd be happy to hear a comment now or feedback now from you guys, if you have anything to say about it.
I think we need to look at the access question first with the building commissioner and the fire chief, and we'll have a response for that next time. But we hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
Mrs. Luttrell?
Good evening. Thank you very much. I love seeing all the natives and all the lid techniques integrated into the design. I think it's really nice. You did a nice job. Couple questions. Did we get a letter from the fire chief?
We received an initial comment letter back in May, late May, during the first submission, which had relatively standard comments. Let me just,
Well,
refresh.
specifically in relation to the 18-foot driveway. We did.
Yes, let me just tell you what it is here. So, May 21st, 2018, Fire Chief Morrow provided reviewed comments to the initial submission, and one of his standard comments under access is all access roads and driveways shall be a minimum of 20 foot wide, Massachusetts Code of Regulation 527 CMR Chapter 18. So when I was reviewing the plans myself, I saw the 18-foot change at the entrances, although you're 22 feet along the back of the building. And I thought, oh, I remember seeing somebody saying 20. Did we talk about allowing less? So I called the fire chief today, and he said that no, 20 is the minimum required for commercial properties.
Okay.
So that was way in the beginning. You're probably a little bit of an oversight, but that and things like, 13 and a half feet of vertical clearance going through the driveway. Make sure that your underground utilities and tanks and cistern are all H20 rated if they're underneath pavement. All turns, access, and cul-de-sacs shall be designed to accommodate the American Association of State Highway Bus 45 design standards. So when I talked a little bit to Joel and Bill today in email, I was concerned with the eastern entrance coming in, because with the 18-foot narrow access way there, it would appear that it would be tight for a truck to turn that corner, because you have a dumpster there. So that's why I focused in on the 20-foot wide.
Oh, okay. I would also suggest on the landscape plan, after all this hard work has been done, it says substitutions approved by landscape architect, and I've mentioned this before. I would ask that, and town planner, just so after we have all these natives, that they don't get substituted for like a burning bush or something down the road. So you've requested a waiver for the 50-foot buffer along the property line that abuts a residential zone. And so you're requesting from 50 feet to 0? Is that what the... So there's a 0 buffer?
The buffer shown on the plan, we don't have a distance shown in the request, so we can revise that, but we have approximately 8 feet between there, so it would be, this is the pinch point, because even though it's the railroad, it's technically zoned residential, so, but yeah, this is the pinch point, but we can update the waiver request to specify an exact distance on that.
Okay. Because although it is the railroad, it's not unheard of for them to disband operations. It has happened.
Yep, that's correct.
And you're going before the zoning board on Wednesday for a special permit? Is that
Scheduled.
Microphone.
We're scheduled to go before them, but I think we were going to see where we're at after this meeting.
okay? That's all I have. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Let's go to sheet 2, which is existing conditions.
Sorry, the server's a little slow.
Yeah, you got it. The development impact statement that we received, that was revised on August 13th, it shows the total acreage on the site is 4.65, and it's showing 0.3 of an acre is wetland, and the rest is forested. And then after the project is built, it shows 2.01 acres remaining as forested. Now, on sheet 2, you've got the match line. And we've really been focused on everything east of the match line. But on sheet 2, it shows the western part of the site on the other side of the match line. So it doesn't show anything happening in those, and is that the 2.01 acres?
I can look into that. That wetland, it does not extend all the way off the site. There's a culvert that comes across, and there is a portion of forested area over there. So it's a combination of that, and as well as what's remaining, the 20-foot buffer from the wetlands and other in the buffer zone, and then what we're maintaining.
So
What we're maintaining along here, which may not seem substantial on the plan, but that a 10-foot strip that's 700 feet long adds up.
but
8 foot.
Well, yeah, averaging, it's not that through the whole thing, but
So, the way I'm reading this, you're not going to disturb anything west of the match line.
west of the, I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me right now. Where's,
Yeah, the top piece.
the top piece, correct. We cannot disturb within 20 feet of the wetlands, and we're stopping short of that on this plan, so nothing in that area is being disturbed.
So that's several hundred feet of Northborough Road that would remain forested.
Yes.
So, when you drive by, you can see the portion of the land that was cleared about 8 years ago, I guess. And then beyond that, there's a tree line of probably 50-foot high trees. And then beyond that is the railroad tracks. Will there be any of that tree line left between the railroad tracks and what you're going to clear?
From north to south on the site. So we're clearing up until the 8-foot strip along the back. So whatever can be maintained across the back there, we haven't located individual trees, so we haven't done a survey that intense for this. But basically they'll put down the limit of work markings in the field, and they'd clear within that. So the limit of work would be the tree line shown on the plans. So I don't have a direct answer to that because we haven't located all the trees. There is also a strip off of the property, and perhaps that's the taller trees because there's about 30 feet between the right-of-way, or sorry, not right-of-way, property line and the railroad bed. So there's probably some growth within there that you can see from Northborough Road as well. Correct, yes.
So on sheet 2, it says edge of existing railroad. It's a dotted line there.
Yes,
Is that the tracks?
that's the tracks, yes.
And then a few feet beyond that would be the edge of the railroad ties, and then a few feet beyond that would be the railroad bed. And then a few feet beyond that would probably be the nearest tree. When you come back, if you could just, for the record, let us know if there'll be any of those mature trees left on the southern part of the site.
Okay, we can do that.
It may not seem important, but when you hire the site guy to come in and clear the site, and we wind up seeing all the trees gone when they didn't need to be, we should make sure it's on the plan.
Yeah, so I'll be out there on Friday to do the test pits, and when I'm out there, I can measure from the edge of the road back to the mature trees to get an idea of where we'd be working in there.
So, let's look at sheet 5. That's the one that grading and utilities plan. I got the half size here, so some of this I can't really see clearly. But, and I know we had this discussion a little bit earlier. The contours on Northborough Road to the east, they start at what looks like 303, and then moving west, 302, 301, 300. And it seems to work its way down through around 295 maybe. These are the contours on Northborough Road.
Yep, that's correct.
And then I look at the contours of the site. And in some cases, it seems as though the site is higher than the road.
That is not the case. There's some points where it's just about level with the road, but in general, it's going to be a roadside swale. So there are some spots where it might only be a foot of change between the road and the center of the swale, but it is lower than the road.
That's what I thought. Some areas are lower. So if a car is driving east and somehow drifts off the road, what's to stop the car from winding up in the rain gardens or in the building?
So that was one concern that we addressed with DPW. We spoke to them, and I apologize for not bringing this up in the presentation, but we did speak to them. And they did not think that a curb would be a benefit for the site because they would like to use that stormwater treatment that we're proposing. And they also didn't think a guardrail would be necessary for the road. So we have run that by DPW, and I can have Karen Galligan submit a formal email to Karina.
Sure. I think we need to revisit that, take a harder look at that, especially in view of, you know, the tragedy that happened there several years ago. There's the concern about the closeness of the building to the actual pavement, which is a dimensional variance, I think, that you've been granted, but also you know, just there's no curb and there's no guardrail. So you go off the road and the car is in your front yard or up against the building. I just think that that's something that needs to be addressed. Now, you said that you've eliminated all of the Cultex, the groundwater recharge, and you're relying on sheet flow. So, to me, that's a savings that could offset the cost, the additional cost of the guardrail. Now, I know I may have missed this, and please tell me if I did in tonight's conversation about the 20-foot wide, the 18-foot wide, and the 20-foot wide driveway. Where does that stand right now?
So shown on the plans right now is 18 feet. I'm going to be calling the fire chief tomorrow to have a discussion with him, see if he would allow 18 feet because the NFPA regulations do allow for the local fire chiefs to approve a little bit narrower width. However, if he is insisting on a 20-foot width, then we will have to go to a 20-foot width on that. And again, those entrances are both areas where there's already extensive porous pavement being used, so as far as stormwater goes, it's very similar. It would barely even make a difference on the calculations.
Yeah, the concern is more, I'm with you, with the narrower, the better for certain types of roadways and driveways, but in this case, this looks like a pretty high volume, and these all won't be compact cars coming in and out of there. They'll be big trucks. So again, we talked about, last time we talked about the possibility of a mezzanine. So I suggest that you either put it on the plan and say that there's going to be a mezzanine in 1, 10, all of them, and to what extent that mezzanine, what the square footage of it would be. If this board approves a building with a certain square footage, and the parking spaces is based on that, and then we go ahead and add mezzanines, you're increasing the area, the square footage of the usable space, which would impact the parking spaces, or could, and it would also have a difference in the meaning or the ability to use the space. Instead of one grade level floor, we're dealing with stairs or an elevator or and then a mezzanine, which, you know, who knows what it's going to be made out of. Will it be made out of metal, structural steel, wood? So we need to get that cleared up. If you want a mezzanine, then you have to tell us.
Okay. Basically, there is no mezzanines proposed, but hypothetically, there will be no floor space added whatsoever, because when I say that, there's no livable floor space added. In other words, if there is a shelf built where somebody can store some stuff above it, that's not livable space. But all of this would have to be approved by the building department, structurally wise and design wise. So we're not going to add any additional like 2-floor space because we don't have enough area to do that anyways. Anything under 7 feet is non-livable, non-usable occupant space.
Right, but we've all seen mezzanines where you can walk. There's a catwalk, or you can walk on it. And that's different than a shelf. You don't walk on shelves. So I'd really like to get that cleared up, so it's not a surprise later on, or a disappointment later on.
No, what he's saying is, if he builds the mezzanine, the space below it is not going to be taller than 7 feet. So you're not technically adding floor area, because if it's not higher than 7 feet, that you wouldn't double count that space.
I respectfully disagree, but again, let's get that cleared up with the, with what exactly you want us to approve, and we'll cross-check that with the building inspector when he's counting area, floor area. Be better for you, be better for us, and going forward. On one of these sheets, it says proposed sign. Proposed freestanding sign, and that's on the western entrance. Is it just one sign?
Yes.
And then I go to the details sheet. I might have missed it, but I don't see a detail of the sign.
The sign.
The sign detail was previously submitted with the first application. The sign has remained the same. It's a 8.5 by 11 color freestanding sign detail provided by a sign company.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. Sorry, I missed that. And then on the taxes, this isn't the first time that the planning board has been dealing with a piece of property where there's back taxes that are due. What's the status on that?
So we don't own the property. We have it under agreement, subject to permitting. So I was notified when I was stopping off to pay an additional fee for F&O. And I notified the attorney for the current owner and told him to take care of it. So he was saying that he was anticipating that they would take care of that at closing, because obviously it would be paying them money. But, you know, I just told him to take care of it.
Yeah, so you're asking the board to give you a permit with the taxes not paid. And the property owner is saying, I'll pay the taxes at the closing. And you're saying that you're not gonna have a closing unless you get your permits. So unless something has changed here at the town hall, it's not gonna work that way. The board would be compelled to not go forward and grant any permits until the taxes are paid, or unless some other arrangement is made and approved between the property owner, you, and the town tax collector and town council.
May I, Mr. Chairman? I think it would be, having done this before, an escrow account with various instructions to the agent to release documents in a certain time sequence can be used for this. I will call Attorney Cipriano to talk about this with him.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, well, it's just we're gonna, as we're approaching a vote, a meeting where we're gonna vote, it's been my experience that we won't vote until the taxes are resolved. And, you know, we don't wanna be talking about that at the moment of the vote. Mr. Jenks.
Another thing we can do, Don, is make that a condition.
Well, again, a condition that we would vote and supposedly grant the special permit and the site plan approval.
With condition that the taxes get paid off by closing.
There are various ways to do it. I'll consult with Attorney Cipriano.
Yeah, yeah, there's, the easiest way is to have the taxes paid, then it's off the table.
I have if my client is amenable, we can put the tax payment into escrow, and the instructions to the agent, who could be town council, is that the tax bill gets paid when and if there's an approval. I haven't read your bylaw, so I assume it is triggered by no approvals without taxes being paid, not no application without taxes being paid. So let me take a look at that, and I'll talk with Attorney Cipriano.
Very good,
Thank you.
very good. I think that was it for me. I'll open it up to town officials. Any town officials want to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Freddie Gillespie, Chair of the Open Space Preservation Commission. And as has been mentioned a bit tonight, we did have a very positive experience working with Joel and his landscape architect. We understand this is a very cutting-edge proposal to use natives for ground cover, and they embraced it once they did. Full on. I mean, it's very impressive, and the one concern I have is that, and we addressed this in our letter, and we've been talking about it, is the establishment. It's not because it's not been done in the past, there's no real standard for how you make sure these are established. I wrote in our letter some of our thoughts on what could be done, and if it's going to be continued, I'd be willing to look into that a little further. The point is they're spending a lot of money on planting this, purchasing and planting, and you want to be sure it's successful, because this is, you know, when I say cutting edge, it's the way landscaping's going to be moving in the future. And it's significant that we're doing it here, and it's significant that they've embraced it. They may have to do their car traffic calculations differently, because if it's successful, we're going to have lots of people coming by to look at it, and we might get a little extra traffic that way. I mean, I'm joking there, but I'm serious. People are very interested in what is happening on this parcel with the landscaping. I acknowledge that's not what the whole project's about, but for this lid technique, above and beyond, and you know, you don't often find the word magnificent in my comment letters, and it was well-deserved. I thought twice about using it, but it really is something. I will say, I'm not a botanist. I don't know all of the, best requirements, a little bit, and I did have a conversation with Peter about, some of the drier plants being in the rain gardens, and, he explained how that would work. I did see something from Fuss and O'Neill that had me concerned. He talked about water, salt, and sand from Northborough Road, and I was a little surprised by that because I thought the point of the rain gardens is to treat on-site water, so I wasn't sure how that was ending up in the rain gardens, but maybe because it's so tight to the road, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that because, and I know that Peter was looking at near the road, making sure the plant material was salt and sand appropriate, but not necessarily in the rain garden. So that's something, if they have another hearing, I'd be willing to take a look at. But as far as how you ensure this is established, the critters eating it when there's small plants, that's something that he's addressed. And that might, be ongoing, but, the 2-year establishment time seems good. And watering, I guess, they're not going to need a lot of water down the road, but you need to get them established, so the sprinkler is appropriate for that. I had a suggestion where it said on the plan that substitutions could be made by the landscape architect, and Mimi had recommended that it say, and the town planner. I would suggest that you add native plants, because if you're going to substitute, there'll be another native plant you can use, even if the one you're not using. Even if one you have already doesn't work, you can find another native that will work. Additionally, I mentioned in our letter that the wildflower mix has some plants that I think are a little too tall. I think the plan is to have, using native plants, to have a landscaped look, not the messy meadow look that is appropriate in some settings, but not in this area. And I believe Peter's working with them to get the taller plants. I had a conversation with New England Wetland Plants that they said they probably can do that. Make the mix not have, there's no sense planting plants that are this tall that you're going to be mowing down before they get there. So, or that would be a site hazard. And then I just, a couple of other things in my points. No invasives allowed to get established. That's part of the weeding. I'm not familiar with the types of compounds you're using for the weeding control. It sounds good. I'm not sure that that's not on the same line as chemicals, because even though it's organic, that you may need to check if it needs to be applied by a licensed professional, and if there's any concerns about using it, even though it's a better method in any of the wetland buffers. Just permitting, you want to be sure you're okay with everyone. But, and we also wanted to thank the planning board for considering this and moving forward on this line of thinking, which is new. We think it's going to be the standard, and we think you will be well applauded in the future for taking this approach. So I think that's it. It sounds like you're going to be continued, and I get another chance at writing a letter. Another comment? Is that correct?
The first part's correct. It will be continued,
Okay. So I can write another letter.
always.
Okay, thank you. But thank you, and really, they are to be applauded for what they've done on this aspect of the plan. So thanks.
I'll just ask them. Yeah. Before I'll open it up to the public or any other public official, just the comment about the salt-tolerant plants, are you prepared to address that tonight?
The plants along the street were all salt tolerant. I did not know about the salt in the rain gardens, so I will have to check that. I have to talk to Bill and find out on that. But along the street, yes, that was salt tolerant.
So, I'm looking on sheet 4. And it shows on the western part of the building, the elevation of the slab is 286.5. And then, over above Unit 1 and Unit 2, there's there's 2 points shown as being elevation 286.67. So that's 0.17 feet above the slab, and it seems to be a lot higher than that.
I'm not sure I'm following the question. We had,
The slab is
Yeah.
286.5.
yes,
So that's the elevation of the slab at the back of the building. And I assume the slab is level. So that's the elevation of the slab at the front of the building. And those 2 points that are referred to above Units 1 and Unit 2, there seems to be a contour line there that says 286.67.
so that's a spark rate on there. In order to maintain the swale along the roadway and have a rain garden at the end, there has to be some cut in that area. We could go to a steeper slope to raise that up a couple feet, but then it starts to look a little, I don't want to say funny, but it gets a little
That's
steep
less
in
than
that
6
area.
inches above the slab.
That's correct from what we're showing, yes. We can grade that at a 3-to-1 slope up to the side of the building to raise that up. We were trying to maintain a natural, gentle slope through that area, through the rain gardens.
Okay. We'll keep an eye on that.
It can be raised. We can do that. I'll make a note right now.
I'm not trying to design it. It just seems to me that the front yard is more than 6 inches above the slab.
Into the facade, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Your grade is
yes.
your slab into the, whatever your facade is of the building, you're gonna have earth there.
So, yes, along all of this, you're going to have varying foundation wall height because you have a change in grade along the front where along the back is a relatively flat area. So if you move more to the east, you'll see there's closer to 6 foot grade change from front to back.
6 foot,
Yeah, not 6
not
inches.
6 inches.
Yes.
We'll let you take another look at that. Open up to the public. Anyone from the public, questions or comments? Seeing none,
There's just an additional, whether we should be concerned about if there's parcel left over that they have divided off. That was brought up by somebody.
question is, further subdivision of the lot. I know for myself, the 2.01 acres of forested portion of the land is a big plus relative to the lower impact development and the green space. If that wasn't there, then, or if that were to be changed after this project is built, and then you're asking for subdividing the land, then you wouldn't have my vote. So, is that your intention, is to retain the lot, the 4.65 acres, and have no intention of, you don't have to answer that tonight if you want to think about that, but if that's in your plans, we should know about that, and we can weigh the loss of those acres of wooded land against your lower impact development proposal.
Thank you.
So, our next meeting
Is next Monday, the 24th. We have one scheduled on the books. Following that is October 15th.
I think we're going to need the 15th with the changes, 24 in number that Fussen O'Neill has asked us to make on the plan. Mr. Chairman, if I might, if we're going to the 15th, can I ask whether or not you envisioned that Mr. Michaud and our landscape architect need to attend on that evening? Mr. Hall will certainly be here.
We need Mr. Hall.
Mr. Hall will be here.
I don't know, we'll, now that you've asked the question, we'll try to focus on getting their pieces resolved between now and the meeting so that Fuss and O'Neill can say, you know, they're all set, and then we'll feel comfortable to say they don't have to show up.
Thank you.
We'll try to be sensitive to that and let them have one more night, one less night away from home. So you want to come back on October
You need that one, don't you?
15th.
Yes.
October 15th. We all have homework. You have homework to do on a lot of these questions, but as Mr. Jenks and the rest of the board said, you know, there's great improvement here, and there's still a lot of open questions. And maybe we can get them all resolved by the 15th. So the, let's see. Yeah, I got it here. So this, the major site plan approval period ends on September 21st, along with the special permit for the lower impact development. And by the way, when I first opened the meeting, I said the first item on the agenda was the major site plan public hearing, but I failed to mention that this is also the continued public hearing for the special permit for lower impact development. So having said that, at the end of this portion of the meeting, does anyone have a problem with that error?
No, Mr.
That I failed to notify that? So what we need to do is extend the approval period for the major site plan and for the lid to a date beyond October 15th, and it's usually, that's a Monday, it's usually the Friday after that. In case we have a problem, we can still put together a meeting in those following days.
Sure.
So that would be the 19th? That the town planner already has ready?
Joe's already seen it.
I know the drill by now.
Okay. Mr. Mills?
So I have to read the whole thing. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we extend the public hearing for site plan approval.
Approval period.
Sorry, the approval period for site plan approval for 154 and 156 Northborough Road, major site plan approval to October 19th.
Was that motion, did that, you
That
said
was the,
site plan, does that include the lid also?
I was gonna do that separately.
Separately. Motion's been made
Second?
and seconded. Any discussion to extend the approval period to October 19th for site plan? All in favor? 5-0. Mr. Mills?
Chairman, I make a motion, we extend the site plan approval period for 154, 156 Northborough Road, special permit lower impact development to October 19th, 2018.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded, and do we have a time for these, for the hearing, for the meeting?
Yes, it'll be the same as this evening. 7 PM for the major site plan approval and 7:05 for the special permit lower impact development.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? We'll see you on,
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I make a
that's
motion.
right. Yep. Mr. Mills, continue the hearing.
Mr.
Hearings.
Chairman, I make a motion that we continue the public hearing for 154, 156 Northborough Road, major site plan approval to October 15th at 7 PM, and also extend the public hearing for 154, 156 Northborough Road, special permit lower impact development to 7:05 PM on October 15th, 2018.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 5-0. We will see you on the 15th.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board members.
Thank you. Mr. Mills,
Make a motion for a 2-minute recess.
Second?
before we do that, although we didn't formally, we're getting rusty here, it's on me. We implied that your, that you requested and were granted the extension of the approval period. So you will sign this, and then I will sign it, and we'll be good to go. Mr. Mills,
Motion for a 2-minute recess.
Second?
motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, 5-0. We'll see you in 2 minutes. Planning Board is back in session after a 2-minute recess. Next item on the agenda is 25 Park Street, preliminary subdivision plan. This has been continued to, from July 23rd, July 30th, and August 7th. I'll ask the town planner to give us an update.
Okay, Peter Bemis with Engineering Design Consultants had previously submitted preliminary subdivision application for 25 Park Street in Southborough, for which he attended a couple of planning board meetings. I believe the last one was on June 7th, at which time he had presented some ideas of a flexible development as opposed to the conventional subdivision. In further investigating and I think talking with his clients, they decided to go the route of a flexible development, so hopefully they'll be submitting for that soon. But in the meantime, in order to close out the preliminary subdivision application, Engineering Design Consultants submitted a letter, and I'll read it. It's to withdraw the preliminary subdivision plan. It says, "Dear board members, on behalf of the estate of Calvin Morrow, owner and applicant of the above referenced project, which is 25 Park Street preliminary subdivision, we are writing to respectfully request that the preliminary subdivision plan currently before the board be withdrawn without prejudice, as the family would prefer to pursue a flexible development, a residential major development RMD concept for the 25 Park Street property. We have already presented the plan to the Open Space Committee and received a positive recommendation from that group. We plan to submit the development plans to the board shortly. Thank you for your consideration. Very truly yours, Engineering Design Consultants, Peter Bemis." And that was dated today, September 17th, 2018.
Very good. Open it up to the board. Any questions or comments?
No questions.
No questions.
No questions.
No questions.
Mr. Mills?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the proponent's request for withdrawal of the submission for 25 Park Street preliminary subdivision without prejudice.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 5-0. That closes that one out. Next item on the agenda is discussion, 6 Meadow Lane, conditions of approval. I'll ask the town planner to begin the discussion.
Okay, I just want to put the plan of discussion up on the screen so we know what we're talking about. So I believe it was it the fall of last year or maybe later? Anyway, the owner of 4 Hidden Meadow Lane came before us for a modification to an approved subdivision. And in that, 2 lots were created. One is the original lot known as 2A now, and a second lot called 2B, which is in the process of being sold or may already have closed. It has conveyed. Brendan Properties is going to be, has the intention to build a home on lot 2B, which is the lower lot as you see on the screen. The remaining lot is the existing house of Ms. Rebecca Franks at 4 Hidden Meadow. 6 Hidden Meadow is the lower lot. Anyway, this all came about because the builder came in looking for a sign-off for the building application from Planning Department, and there were a couple of conditions that had to be met prior to that. One being that the open space be marked with pheno markers, which has been done. And we have a letter from the engineer certifying that 5 markers were installed where they're required. Number 2 was that prior to a building application, the drainage for that proposed lot 2B needed to be approved by the town. So Cornerstone Engineering submitted a plan, a drainage calculations and a septic plan with drainage information on it, which I'm presenting up here for Lot 2B, which has currently gone through one review with Fuss and O'Neill, who had a couple of minor follow-up revisions needed, and currently Fuss and O'Neill's reviewing that for their final follow-up. So we're hoping that those two conditions for the building permit are taken care of. But in the decision for the modification, when this lot was further subdivided, there is a condition that the open space language be included on both lots, 2A and 2B. So I did research, and I was working with Leslie Carey from Brendan Properties to make sure everything was met, and we do have a deed that shows Lot 2B conveyed has the language. However, Lot 2A, which is the remaining existing lot, hasn't been conveyed, and it may not be for some time. Ms. Frank's attorney indicated that they typically don't add that language to the deed unless it's conveyed. So I thought it would be best if I talk to Don, we bring it before the board to discuss if that's the case. Do they need to convey the deed, or do they need to change the language of the deed without conveying it to include the open space at this time? Or is it good enough that it's on the plan of land that's recorded, it is in the modification decision that's recorded, that's a requirement? Should the land be conveyed, Lot 2A, that includes the open space language then? Was that a long sentence? I'm sorry. Trying to get it all out. So do they have to put the language in now and rewrite the deed without conveying 2A? Or can they do that in the future?
The deed is the controlling document. Plans are not the controlling document. So if something is on the plan that is not on the deed, then you generally give that no weight. If something is on the deed and is left off of the plan, then it's good because it's on the deed. The deed is more important than the plan. The deed is...
Trumps the plan.
Yeah, I hate to use that word now. But it controls. So my recommendation would be to get it on the deed if we can do that.
Don, can I just make a statement?
Yeah, come up to the microphone, but I want to see if anyone, any of the board members has a different opinion.
Hi, I'm Leslie Carey.
Hold on, please.
I have no conflicting opinion.
Yeah, I agree with Phil. The reason why that we put that on there is because of past experience and what's happened to open space in the past. And additionally, how would we ever make sure that if it's conveyed 20 years down the road that language would ever end up on the new deed? It seems unmanageable.
I just want to point out, the condition is right there, number 9, just the language of it. So it's not tied to the building permit, which is impacting Leslie and Brendan Properties. This is like a separate issue of that, whether Rebecca is made to do this now or later. Okay.
I agree with what Mr. Jenks said. How are you, Leslie?
I'm well, Don. How are you?
Welcome back.
Thank you. I just want to say that I'm here to listen and facilitate whatever needs to get done so that all the conditions of our approval continue to be met. My suggestion would be, instead of doing a deed from Rebecca to Rebecca, but to do an easement deed, preserving the open space easement in perpetuity with the same language that's in the deed. I don't know. I think that's probably the best way to deal with it. She was hesitant to do a deed to herself because she already owns the property. I believe that was part of the discussion with her attorney. But I think if we were to do an easement deed that provided the language, get it duly recorded, I'll even be willing to prepare it and
obtain her signature if I can within the next couple of days, so that it doesn't affect our approval, if that makes sense.
Mr. Jenks?
I believe that makes sense.
So that condition applies to both lots. But you've already bought, Brendan already bought, what is this one, 2A? No, 2B.
My deed specifically has the exact language the board wants in it. When she conveyed out, we made sure the condition of approval's in our deed, and I can provide you with a copy of this. So our lot is meeting the condition of the approval.
And we have that document.
Oh, okay, so we're just talking about 2A.
2A.
today.
It was the lingering condition to be met for the modification of the subdivision.
So what you're proposing seems to be okay.
Okay, I'll get it done and get it to you, Corinna, as soon as reasonably possible.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Will you be talking to Rebecca
I will,
Franks?
either through Marshall Gould, our attorney, or through giving her a call directly.
Okay, because she'll probably call me tomorrow to find out.
No, that's fine.
Okay,
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Public Safety Complex, police parking solar canopies. Well, that's the town planner. She and I spoke about this one, and I wanted to make sure that it was brought to the discussion level at the planning board's meeting, and let the public have knowledge of this discussion. It's really, I guess, just a discussion at this point, but town planner will give us more details.
Okay, a couple weeks ago, I got an email from another party who was interested in, who does, owner's project manager for solar projects like this, who has recently done it for the St. Mark's Solar Array and worked with St. Mark's to help expedite their project. And she copied me on the email, so I became aware that there was an RFP that was put out by the, either the Board of Selectmen through the Public Safety Building Committee, to get information about potential solar panels on the canopies for the police parking at the Public Safety Building. So I got a copy of the RFP, looked at it, and then followed up with Town Administrator Jason Malinowski to find out what the intent was. And the RFP is for not only operating those solar panels, but also installing the canopies with the solar panels on them. So I was concerned with that, need site plan approval, et cetera. And it turns out, in an email back from Jason Malinowski, chairman of the Public Safety Committee, he indicated that really this was a research effort at this point to determine what it might cost and what it would take to do that. But you can see on the plan that I included that's part of the RFP that not only had they proposed it on the western, is that the western side? No, the northern side, which we saw during site plan approval, but they were also adding it canopy to the southern side on these 7 spaces that you see on the board there. So, you know, I was just concerned, is that a major modification, minor modification, whatever? It's a structure that gets added. So that just caused us in planning to do some research. And again, I just found out that it's more of a, it's not set in stone yet. It's more of a find out mission as to what it would entail and what it might cost. It had originally been in the project, but I think it was stricken out, so there was some contingency carried for this work.
Are they planning on putting solar on the building itself too?
Not that I'm aware of,
Just on the?
just
roof?
on the police parking canopies, yeah. So this is the information, so you have it in case it does come down the path to planning for site plan.
It was on the original plan, I believe, on the north side, but not that many. It was, as I remember it, maybe half that. And are you saying that got dropped?
No, I think that is still on the approved plan.
Okay,
I mean, it's on the approved plan on the north side. The
okay.
canopy was always shown there because you can see the column symbols, which were identified,
So they're looking at extending that.
possibly to the other side.
No, extending it on the north side.
No, I think that's the original canopy length, and I can tell you because
Was all of that?
I have it right here. This was the sheet from the final permit set. And if you look on the screen, see right there, see the columns? They go all the way, that entire stretch. So that canopy was proposed on that side, if I'm not mistaken, unless I'm reading it wrong. So we didn't get the updated architecturals, but the architecturals showed canopy on that side. And I can zoom in, I just think, if you
Well,
look,
so what is the question for tonight?
it was on the agenda to see if it really needed site plan, but then I was informed that it's not, then they haven't decided yet if they go on that path. So it's
Okay.
kind of it turned out to be more informative now.
Okay, so you don't want answers to that?
Just want you to be aware.
Well, we can go beyond that. For example, if I could, Phil, the canopy on the south is an additional structure. And I think that that changes the appearance of the site from Route 85
Oh, yeah.
and maybe even from Lattisquama Road. 'Cause it's the furthest part of the facility to the south. And the further south you go, the more you can see from Lattisquama. So that would be a concern. And then,
And closest to the golf course.
right, and then so that's an appearance thing, but then there's also the functional part, which is, I believe the canopies were pitching, the roof, the canopy was not flat, it would slant to one, it would slant to the back of the lot, of the parking lot, so that when the water's dripping off of it, it doesn't drip in front of the car, it drips behind it. But because it's on the north, solar panels would be tipped the opposite direction. So would you have a canopy that pitches downhill to the north, and then another structure on top of it, which would be the panels pitched to the south? Now, the canopy on the south, which is not part of the project, would probably have, Karina and I had this discussion, would the solar panels be the same, would essentially be in the same pitch as the canopy? Or would you have a canopy, let's say at 10 degrees, and then a solar panel on top of that at 20 degrees? Which could be pretty unsightly. So I think those are the kind of comments that should, if we want, to send back to the public safety people, and also if there's any of the neighbors watching, now they're aware that this is being considered, and just keep an eye out for any changes, and make sure that they're properly handled in a public way. I'm sure they will be, but these are some of the concerns. Mrs. Luttrell, did you have anything?
No, I agree with you. And it might not be a bad idea to shoot them a quick note if they're, just if those, so they know concerns going in their
Well, they should also be,
exploratory stage. Sorry.
also be concerned about golf balls going in all directions and how
If a golf ball
resilient
will impact the
Yeah.
panel?
because, I mean, I can tell you from experience, I've talked to people who've been at the clubhouse on the old porch and got hit when people were driving off T1, and it was, you know, you think you're set back and everything, but anyhow, that would just be another thing to be mindful of. If you're putting expensive solar panels, you don't want to be replacing them every summer.
Is that it on that discussion item?
Can I just point out one thing? I did, there was an email from Jason Malinowski. Those additional canopies are not part of our current plan for construction. We plan to follow the approved site plan. The reason they are included is because they were taken out of a part of an original cost cutting before the planning process. And if it could now provide a benefit to the town, we wanted to at least explore it in one RFP. So in my conversations with Vertex as the owner's project manager, Mark Purple, town administrator, and Jason Malinowski, chair, I did point out the concerns about the angling of the panels, and they said they would keep us informed if they do take that path or if they, what they need to do. Okay, sorry.
Okay, to move on to the next item, which is the discussion item, vote to recommend planning board representative to Chapter 61 Working Group. Mrs. Luttrell?
I make a motion that we recommend Ms. Luttrell to the...
Hold on, we'll ask the town planner to give us the latest on that one.
Sorry.
That's okay. It just came up at the beginning of the meeting. We don't need to address agenda item regarding vote to recommend planning board rep to Chapter 61 Working Group at this time.
I reread the charge for the working group, and we've fulfilled our charge, and it goes back to open space.
I'd like to thank Ms. Luttrell for her work on the working group for Chapter 61. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is discussion, the 2008 Master Plan Update. I'll ask the town planner to begin the discussion on this. Well, I'll actually continue it. This has been brought up at previous planning board meetings over the summer, and we have a little bit more meat on the bone right now for this project.
Okay, I thought a copy of this was in your packet. Over the last couple of weeks, Pam Rivera, my new assistant, and I kind of brainstormed with Dawn's guidance how we might go through, well, we had to bounce it off you to make sure we were going down the right path because we weren't involved in the first one. To come up with information as to how the original master plan was developed, how it came about from start to finish, the different groups involved. So Pam did some really good research, and she found that VHB, who was the original consultant for the 2008 master plan, prepared an RFP for the town of Hudson to do their master plan in 2012, and in that they described the procedures and processes they did for Southborough, specifically stating all that. So what Pam did is she compiled that information, organized it into a summary, an outline of a very cursory at this point way to proceed with updating the master plan, which you typically do every 10 years. So that would be 2018 going into 2019. So this wasn't in your meeting package. It should have been, but basically it says the background. The town of Southborough retained VHB, Vanessa Hangen and Bruslin to assist in drafting the first master plan for the town. The plan examined transportation connection, housing opportunities, linkages to recreational resources, investment in historic resources, and prospects for revitalization. They took a very comprehensive approach by examining the town in its current state, the challenge it was currently facing, and created a detailed implementation program that addressed priority action items. The party responsible for implementation, a timetable, and identifying potential funding sources. So the process, generally, whether we choose to work with an outside consultant like VHB or another, we'd start with creating steering committee of some sort. Originally, the first plan was set up that they retained a consultant to execute the master plan, and the consultant helped decide what the next steps were with a kickoff meeting, create a steering committee, and then public meetings get scheduled to get the community input and update the status of the plan. Those committees then work on the visions and goals established. The town planner, staff, the planning board, other boards, and the public come together and address those 5 items we talked about previously. Transportation, land use, social services and energy, housing, economic development, natural, cultural, historic, open space, recreation, public services, social services. And one of the key things I want to point out here is that, you know, of course, we try to do this as much as we can on our own, but some of the items, for example, transportation and energy, those are very specific, very changed from 10 years ago, and you need specialists to tell you where those types of, what are the key issues related to energy, transportation. You know, now with solar and wind and all this stuff, there may be components that were never in the original that now have to be included as new key items, and I think a consultant would be very helpful to get on board who has done many of these and knows what towns are targeting, what's the norm, what's the standard, so that we're not off just focusing on one area and we're missing 3 or 4 other ones that are really crucial just because they're not in the prior plan. So I think we're to a good start. We're going to look into this a little further. The next step would be determining how we go about getting a subcommittee formed with the public and some board representatives to determine the next step. How much do we need a consultant? How much can we do on our own? Just get the ball rolling, if that's okay with the planning board.
Did the research show the names of the people that were on that steering committee 10 years ago?
I have to check. I'm sure there's record of it because there's.
It doesn't necessarily have to be the same people, obviously, but those names would help us with you know, the type of people that we had. Were there any developers? And I believe there were.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any members from other elected or appointed boards?
Yeah.
Were there citizens at large? So what I would suggest, well, I'll open this up, but I would suggest that we be at a point next week, we're meeting next week,
Mm-hmm.
Where we can identify, have those type of people from the citizens or consultants, and then maybe agree to draft people, get volunteers to join that, and so that they can start moving the thing along. I think, and then the comment about, trying to do it ourselves with certainly a lot more sophisticated computer help now than we had 10 years ago with the different software and stuff. But I think that the master plan that we have now, even though it's 10 years old, and there are areas like the technology parts that would need to be updated just by the fact that things have advanced so much. But it could be that the townspeople feel that the 2008 master plan is still very appropriate, and that it may not need a whole lot of revisions, in which case we may try to do those simple things ourselves, and then if the group agreed that we need help from consultants on these other areas, we'd have those identified and then see if we can get funding for that.
Right, because some of these features are standard information that we hear every day. When you talk about recreation fields maybe and certain other types of land uses that are more generic as opposed to these very specific energy things. That's where I can see we would need a little help, so. But I already see there's pretty good information, I've seen this before, but it lists all the people involved previously and from what boards and committees and who was on the steering committee. And it didn't, so we'll gather that information, make it clear for next Monday.
Don, was the 2008 one, and I'm not asking this and knowing that you've been on the board forever, but was the 2008 one, was that the first master plan Southborough ever did? No, because I recall being at one and the collaborative effort with the townspeople. I recall that when I was there, we were down at Finn School, was one of the locations, and we broke up and we looked at different things, and this is before I was even involved in the CPC, before me and the planning board and everything, just getting involved, and that was, it was great to see how many people did come out and give feedback at that time. So I would not anticipate that you can do this all on your own, that you will need help at least coordinating that, because getting participation, hopefully all those listening now will be excited and look forward to when this occurs. But to get the word out to others to participate is, I think, critical for the success of the plan going forward. So I'm just saying that it's a long-winded way of saying that I anticipate you'll have my support for getting help to get as much outreach as possible as we go forward.
And just think how much technology has changed how you can reach out to people,
Yeah, there was a master plan, I think it was 1984 or 86, and there may not have been another one until 2008. But I remember being involved in the one in the 80s, and when we looked, or when anybody looked at that, they realized how, it had things in there like preservation of farms, and because back then there were still farms in Southborough, preservation of open space, and between the middle of the 1980s and the end of the 1990s, probably 30% of the open space in the town was developed. So it was obvious in 2008 that it was way out of touch with what was going on in the town. And so we had the consultant, and it was a real big effort and a really good update of the town's master plan. And because I think it was so well done, and because it was only 10 years ago, yeah, a lot of things have changed, but that the change in the last 10 years isn't as great as the change between the previous master plan and this one, which was enormous in the town. The town changed a lot in the 80s and the 90s. So we'll put it on the agenda for our next meeting. Anything else on that? Okay, next item on the agenda is the planner's report.
Give me 1 second, just put this away.
See, and then we'll go, at some point, we'll go over the, what we have on the agenda for the September 24th. But,
Okay.
planner's report.
Okay, some of these I'm just gonna go through quickly, because there's two that we have to talk about just a little bit more. I had a successful review with the Personnel Board for my 1 year. Thank you. Just letting you know.
It was by far the easiest and fastest and one of the most successful performance reviews with the Personnel Board we've had with the town planner in a long time. And it's a reflection of the top quality town planner that we have and the work that she's doing.
Thank you.
And the diligence of the search committee.
5G antennas, Heidi Davis's concerns for potential bylaw, trying to work with the town administrator and Board of Selectmen's office to come to terms with what to do next and who would be in charge of that. Still don't have any more information than that at this point. We have a new conservation agent, Melissa Danza, who started last week. She's fabulous, she's very bright, very great people skills, interacts with us on a daily basis. I've already been to a site visit with some abutter complaints with her. She asked me to attend with her, being new and knowing some of the areas. So that's working out great. We hope that she remains where she is situated, because it's a real big benefit all around, I think. So, Stonebrook Village, I got a call from Lisa Pizzoni. She's the attorney who works with Capital Group Properties for Stonebrook Village and the 55-plus development. They want to close on a unit, and they need, in the condition, it requires them to get a release of the units, just like a release of the lots. So let me just make sure I'm covering the right thing here. So one of the conditions in the covenant that was prepared says that any and all lots subject to this covenant, or any condo unit constructed on Lot 3, which is the 55-plus lot of Stonebrook Village, may be released from its operation and restrictions by vote of the planning board, enumerating the lot or unit so released upon substantial completion of construction of ways and installation of services and other improvements to provide access and services to such a lot or unit. So the first question I asked was, how do we prove it was it's substantially complete? And we discussed two ways. She has a certificate of occupancy for 5 of the units. And a certificate of occupancy, according to the original decision, is not supposed to be issued unless the base coat is paved to access these units. And the base coat doesn't get paved unless the infrastructure's in. And second side of that is, when I started here and that project started active in the construction mode again, I engaged Fuss & O'Neill to continue, or to start, I should say start, construction phase inspections, so that we could determine everything was being put in right, even though that will be a private road. there was already funds in place, and we just needed to supplement that with a minor amount. So Fuss and O'Neill has been out there, but that's the other option. So, Attorney Pizzoni asked me to ask the planning board what they thought if a certificate of occupancy from the building department was sufficient to show substantial completion, or do we take the other path and have Fuss and O'Neill confirm, maybe have Stonebrook Village's engineer also prepare a letter certifying they're substantially complete, and that gets checked by Fuss and O'Neill.
Can you read the condition again?
The condition says that any and all lots subject to this covenant or any condominium unit constructed on Lot 3 may be released from its operation and restrictions by vote of the planning board, enumerating the lot or unit so released upon substantial completion of construction of ways and installation of services and other improvements to provide access and services to such lot or unit. So it would have to be substantially complete for the board to vote on it. So we have to prove it's
Substantially complete for the access, not the
Yes.
actual buildings.
right.
Okay, thank you.
And, well, I have it right here, I can quickly show you. Sorry, it's taking so long here. Let me see. Shut this down. Planners report. Okay, so if you look on the board up here, there are units 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 along the top over here. So this is, these 4, I have to see what she said, hold on. Oh, here it is, hold on. So she was asking me about, here it is, give me 1 second. Here, I've attached occupancy certificates for units 1, 2, 3, and 4, which reflect this top area right here. So this is 1 Stonebrook, 3 Stonebrook Court, 5 Stonebrook, and 7 Stonebrook. These 4 units. There are some units back here that are still being constructed, but one of those has been closed on, and one unit, they want to close on. And she noticed that it required this and contacted me about it. So they're being proactive. I do have the certificates of occupancy for those 4 units. So in the original conditions, that's the other thing I wanted to tell you. One of the conditions, number 45 of the major site plan decision of 2013, said, no occupancy permit for a building in the project shall be issued until the binder base coat of pavement for the portion of the roadway serving that building has been installed. So, I've been out there several times. That's in there. They have other issues with conservation and runoff and erosion control that they've been working on. But as far as the roadway, I think it's in. It'd be nice to have, but I don't want to act as engineer. I think that either Fuss and O'Neill or we get confirmation from the building department that it's substantially complete. Then you can vote on it.
I think I'd be fine with going with the building inspector. Keep it in town. I mean, it's talking specifically about the roadway. If it was, significantly complete of the entire development, I think that would be another issue, but you're talking about the ways itself. If they say that the access is provided and significantly complete, then I'll go with it.
Did you say one of these has been closed on and that was not released?
It was missed. So she wants to, initially she said, I'd like to remedy that by putting both of those on the agenda to get a vote to release. But she said, I do have certificates of occupancy for 4 of them. I could do them all at once, and then it would eliminate that concern.
Don, what has the standard been in the past? Is it occupancy from the building commissioner? I mean, that is a pretty standard completion or substantial completion test.
I don't remember this happening relative to occupancy permits. Did you say that the binder is in?
Yes.
All the utilities are in?
Yes.
For those 4 units?
I believe yes. I would have to just 100% confirm it, but I know the binder is in that, along that stretch. Again, I would like, in addition to the certificate of occupancy, perhaps the engineer of record would submit a certified letter saying it's substantially complete to meet these 2 conditions, the covenant and this.
But what if the engineer says it's not, then, and these are the things that aren't done, like, for example, the water line to the house isn't connected.
Mhm.
Or, you know, the power panel hasn't been activated, hasn't been energized. So, and they have an occupancy permit from the building inspector. I think we'd all be curious as to how that would happen. But then going back to what Mr. Mills said, before the building inspector would issue an occupancy permit, I would think that he'd need to have, you know, his focus is on the unit, not necessarily the road or the drainage. I mean, he's told us that a number of times because he has limited resources. It's just him. So his focus has been on, you know, the living space, the safety to access it and to use it. So I think if we went to the Fuss and O'Neill, is that who it is, Fuss and O'Neill?
Correct.
We may, you know, don't ask the question if you can't live with the answer. So
Right.
it may be that it's probably inappropriate for us to second guess. We may want to learn more about how the occupancy permits were issued so that if something was missed, we could bring that to the attention of the building inspector so that for the remaining units, he'd be able to pick up on if he missed something. But I would say that if they've got occupancy permits from the building inspector, we should honor that and maybe have you have a discussion with him that we had this discussion and see if the way he's issuing these, has issued these and will be issuing them.
Aligns itself.
Yeah, if there's anything missing, or, you know, if the building inspector didn't have all the information, and if we help him with all the information that we have, then it may work smoother for the remaining units.
And can I just add, this is different from a lot release because with a lot, you don't have to have a building on it. You just have to have the infrastructure and roadway, say the public portion, complete, whereas this is a little bit different.
Right, and that goes back to what I said before, which is usually we don't get involved in the occupancy permits. Our focus is on, you know, the roadway and the drainage and the lots, not necessarily the ability of the building to be occupied.
This happens to say, and installation of services and other improvements to provide access and services to such lot or unit. So what is service? And maybe that's, I can get clarification to make sure that includes. Okay. And so she was asking, if we have a meeting on the 24th, could they get on the agenda for these, to request these release of the units, if I can get the information in time.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'm supposed to check with the building inspector?
Well, I think you
Or-
got your answer is, we're not gonna task Fuss and O'Neill to look at those 4 units.
Okay,
And then you can have the discussion with the building inspector, maybe show him those, the covenant that you're reading from, and then I'm sure he's gonna tell you that, yeah, I wouldn't issue an occupancy permit unless the place has electricity and running water, has stairs and doors and windows and
yeah.
heat,
Okay,
right?
yep. Got it.
Okay.
Do we want him to give us a letter saying that they're significantly complete?
Well, if he's issued the occupancy permits, then,
That implies
Okay.
if we're on the same page and it's meaning what we think it means. I'm just gonna confirm.
yeah, if it doesn't, well, then you can learn about that and then see what needs to be done. But
Okay.
one step at a time, then.
Okay. Then, eventually we'll have, a joint meeting with Open Space Preservation Commission, just not at this time, we're gonna postpone it a little further, so she can get people together still. Town council workshops, already 2 have gone by, there's one more left for combo for planning and zoning. That'll be September 29th.
No, that got changed.
Oh, it
to
did?
a date, not yet, no.
Hasn't said it yet.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that got changed.
Be determined. Okay.
We didn't pick a date yet, but it won't be the 29th, that we know.
Okay. And then lastly, for this evening, this is another little bit where I'm actually looking for a little bit of guidance. I got a call from the owner of 8 Fitzgerald Lane, which was part of the Highlands subdivision. And in the back of their lot, number 5, let me just quickly show you here. It helps if I can show you. Okay, if you look at this plan up here, I'm pointing at lot number 5 up on the screen. And right here is open space easement designated, okay? So, what happened is, the person who lives there had a tree fall, and she believed it was from the open space area, and it hit her house, or her deck, did some damage. She's concerned that there were other trees that may go. It happened during one of the really windy storms a few months ago. So I looked at the certificate of approval of the definitive subdivision, and one of the conditions was that the open space covenant shall be submitted and approved by town council prior to the planning board signing the final plans. So then I looked up the open space, the covenant, the open space easement restriction, and one of the open space restrictions says, removal or destruction of trees, shrubs, or other vegetation shall be prohibited. So she wanted to know what she's allowed to do and who's responsible. She possibly sees other trees that could come down. She doesn't know if she's allowed to take them down ahead of time if they're no good. And I said, well, I would think that there's probably a public safety issue if you had an arborist tell you the tree is public safety, and then submit it to the planning board. They'd probably discuss it. It may even be sooner than that. If it's public safety, she may be able to have some. So I didn't know how to direct her 100%. So I told her I would discuss it briefly if you had any input. There's a restriction to remove trees. She thinks there's other problematic trees. Does she cut them down, replant some? I don't know.
You keep saying public safety, but this is private property, right?
Oh, yeah, private property, meaning she's a
And the tree,
person.
the tree is, or the trees would either fall on her house or the
Correct,
neighbor's houses.
yes.
I think what you're proposing is probably the way to go. Have her work with you, maybe take some pictures and submit them to us,
Mhm.
and then, I guess, get an opinion from somebody that knows about trees. And so if the tree that fell is being taken care of or not, and if there's other trees that are a concern, then it should, be brought to our attention, and then hopefully the board would rule on that condition. Basically saying that if the intention of the condition is that the healthy trees would not be removed just for the sake of cutting them down. We want to keep the trees in the green space. But if the tree transitions to something beyond a healthy tree and becomes a hazard, then I think that goes beyond the intent of that condition.
Yeah,
Any questions or comments on that?
okay, that's very helpful.
My only comment would be trying to think of why someone might want to keep an unhealthy tree in some capacity, not the full tree, would be if there were certain animals that would thrive from getting the bugs out of a decaying tree or something like that. I have no idea, but I could see that argument being put forth. So it might, maybe it's not the whole tree come down, but the majority of it, so it doesn't impact, her property or damage or something like that, and some portion of it, and I'm just putting it out there that that could be an argument. I'm not saying it's my argument, I'm just saying it could be one.
I'd like to point out that I did forward this information to Open Space Preservation Commission for their feedback on if they've had history of something like this.
So I guess when talking to the landowner, let her know that, maybe it's, the whole thing doesn't come down, but it gets trimmed to a point that it won't hit you. So don't commit to the tree being fully removed.
Right, and she may not know, so it would be, maybe an arborist could tell her. Right, and that, all right. I did suggest that initially to her, but that I would just confirm. Okay,
Anything else?
nope, that's it for tonight.
Next item is the approval of the minutes. We have them on our, in our packet. If the board needs more time, we could do these next week, but
Let's find out. Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the draft planning meeting minutes of the April 30th, 2018 meeting of the planning board.
I wasn't there.
I guess we need more time.
no, we just,
Second for discussion.
motion's been made and seconded. Discussion. We'll note that Mr. Mills wasn't there for that meeting. Go ahead, Mrs. Latrobe.
I would appreciate more time. I haven't had a chance to go through them.
Mr. Jenks, want to withdraw the motion?
I will withdraw.
Okay, next item on the agenda is our next meeting, subject to change. What do we have for agenda items for that meeting?
Master plan update information. Master plan update information, and possibly the Stonebrook Village release of units. We have no public hearings, and the open space meeting, the joint meeting, is going to be pushed into October.
So, do we want to have the town planner see if Stonebrook can wait until a date beyond September 24th, and no later than putting it on our agenda on October 15th? And if something else comes up or doesn't come up, then it's possible that we would not have to meet on the 24th, since there's no public hearings.
That sounds like
That's
an ingenious idea.
easy question to answer.
So, would you say that was, what was the word? Magnificent?
Partnership?
No, the landscape,
It's magnificent.
magnificent. So was that a magnificent idea?
It was magnificent. That's why you're chairman.
So we'll keep ourselves penciled in for next Monday, but we'll look forward to the town planner doing what she needs to do so that we don't have to give up a night just for something that's not a public hearing, or that's not have an impact on time.
I do know that they were under the pressure to try and close this property, but that's not planning board's fault of the timing. However, I just want to point out that Wednesday I have a workshop that I'll be attending for planning-related information. And then on Thursday and Friday, I have a wedding. So
Short week.
tomorrow I'll be
Good luck.
coordinating that. Oh, thanks, it's my niece. So, she picked Thursday in New Hampshire, about 4 hours away.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? We're adjourned.